Welcome back to the table. Today we are looking at a game called The Spill. This one is from Smirk and Dagger. It's a 1 to 4 player co-op game. It's kind of a reverse on the tower defense concept because we're not protecting this tower. This is the oil rig and it's spilling oil out onto the board. We're going to be ships around the perimeter here trying to quell that oil and hopefully save some marine life.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, this is a completely cooperative game. I mean, this oil spill is going to just keep permeating into the ocean, and it's going to keep spreading out into these various sectors through the use of these dice. And that's why the oil rig kind of looks like a dice tower, because it is. You're actually going to be dropping the dice into the tower, and they will land in one of the 4 quadrants of the board. And as this game goes on, these quadrants are going to get progressively worse when it comes to the oil. Eventually, the oil is going to contaminate these precious little animals that you see around the outside edge of the board, which is bad. Our goal is to actually get in here and save these animals from the oil spill before they get contaminated while trying to manage the oil itself, which is not an easy task.
Yeah, like any good co-op, there's going to be a lot of ways to lose and just a few ways to win. There's not just one way in this. You do have some win conditions that you have to serve, and that is over here on the situation board, as well as a lot of other things going on. But the win conditions are right here, so you have to meet those 3 things in order to win without having a lose condition happen as well. But also on the situation board, you're going to have a place to store the oil that you're removing from the board. You're going to have a place to store any of the marine life that you save. And then across the top here is a track that sets the difficulty setting. And as more and more oil spill out onto the board in certain ways, this is going to ratchet up throughout the game, making it so at the beginning of each turn, even more oil is going to come out.
Yeah, which can get very dangerous because you're always trying to manage the dice or the oil, but you're going to have more dice added every single turn. At the start of the game, you're just going to have 8 dice, and those dice are just literally dropped into the dice tower, or should I say oil rig, to see where they land. And you can see that each one of these quadrants has a list of numbers from 1 to 6. It's going to show you where to place the dice. And like we said, this is a reverse tower defense kind of situation. So the dice are going to come from the inside and work their way out. The animals are going to be in danger. If there's a die near them, the next die that's placed in any given sector is then going to cover that animal. They're going to flip over to their contaminated side, and that's kind of bad for the animal. They can be lost or have to go to the sick bay. If you don't get to a contaminated animal, the turn they get contaminated, they're lost. And that's kind of a sad thing.
Yeah, like we said earlier about co-ops in general, this is a game where you're going to be running around frantically trying to get where you need to be when you need to be there. Now, there's 4 roles in this thing, which are these specialists. And no matter what the player count, you're going to play with 4 of these. So the 2 of us will take 2 specialists each, but then go around the table. And if my yellow specialist has his turn, but the situation is over here, I may not be able to get there. So you have to make those decisions about whether or not we all want to clump up in one area, which could be very dangerous. But if a lot of oils come out there, we might want to address that. But you're leaving a lot of other areas susceptible around the table.
Yeah, you never know when the situation is going to turn. Because like David said, based on the difficulty, at the start of each turn, you're adding more and more dice to this tower, which means more and more dice are coming out. And you could be adding 4, 5, or even 6 dice. And chances are you're only going to get to mitigate 2 or 3 of those on your turn. So you can see how this board is going to get quickly filled up, and there's going to be a lot of those hot zones that you need to get to in order to really focus. Because you're balancing a few different things here, like any good co-op. Because there's a few ways you can lose the game. If all 3 sectors of a board ever fill up with oil, it's called a spillout. You get 6 spillouts, it's game over. If you get 1 of every contaminated animal in the sick bay, it's game over. Or if you get 3 contaminated animals of any one type, it's game over.
Yeah.
So you're always watching for these things. You can't let a sector get filled. You can't let that last animal go into the sick bay. You have to be watching. And you can be in situations where you could be 2 or 3 different ways to lose, and that you have to monitor and make sure those situations don't exist on the board.
Yeah, this is a game like many where you're going to want to focus on surviving the bad things long enough that you can actually get some of the good things to happen. Because if you focus too much on the good things, you're bound to let some of those bad things slip through. And those good things are these win conditions here. In this game, it's going to be save 3 contaminated animals. Now, that may sound bad. You don't want to let animals get contaminated, but trust me, it's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, they will. You can't avoid it.
They absolutely will. And you need to get there and save at least 3 of those throughout the game. The next one is to remove 12 oil from the board. Now, we haven't mentioned this, and we'll get to this when we talk about the turn structure, but you can either push oil back into the bag or remove it entirely. Removing it costs a lot more points, but when you do, you're going to place it right here. Once you remove 12, that's going to be another win condition. And mind you, you have to get all 3 of these win conditions to win. The last one is to save 2 full sets of marine life. As you can see here across, there's 6 different types of marine life. Once you get 2 full rows done, that's going to be the 3rd win condition. And when you do that, and at the end of a player's turn, those 3 things have been met, you'll have won the game.
So let's talk about how you're actually going to manipulate that situation board. And that's by taking actions on your turn. But before you can take actions, you have to do the spill phase like we talked about, where you're dropping new dice in and you're seeing how the board state changes. Any animal that is hit with an oil is contaminated. Any contaminated animal that was still on the board that gets hit with oil again goes to the sick bay, which can be bad.
Yeah.
And you can also draw a special blue die, which is called the weather die. Now, your player aid contains a lot of information. One of the things at the top, it shows you the effect of the weather die. These are not good things.
Generally, no.
Generally, the weather die is either going to make it harder for you to move, harder for you to take actions, or they're going to add more die to the oil spill. There is one, if you roll a 6, you get a bonus action that turn. So there's a little bit of hope. That's all listed at the top. You're also going to have, like David said, your special ability, and then all the actions you can take are listed on the bottom of the player board, making it very easy to decide which actions to take during the player board. However, knowing your actions and knowing when to take the right action is a different story, because you only have 4 action points to spend on your turn. Now, you could get more, potentially, if you rolled that 6, or you can add more oil dice to this extra oil action pool over here, which is bad news overall, but you could theoretically take up to 6 actions.
Yeah, it's really kind of cool. This extra action pool here is something that a lot of co-op games don't have, but it really does let you get a little bit more done on your turn at the risk of messing up the next person that takes their turn,
Right.
because these die are added to their roll. So you're going to not just put in 3 die, but maybe 5, or if the difficulty's ratcheted up, even more than that. But some of the things you're going to be doing on your turn, first and foremost, of course, is moving around the board. It's going to take 1 action point to move up to 2 spaces, 1 or 2, in either clockwise or counterclockwise direction. This is how you're going to move around the board. The next thing is to spend, again, 1 action point to rescue a healthy marine animal. This is an animal that is not contaminated, but if you are in the sector, you can spend 1 point to simply take this turtle, for example, and place it over here on the situation board. Again, wanting to try to get these full rows done.
Yeah, you can also either push back or remove dice. Pushing back dice is going to help you out a little bit. You're going to get a die off the board. Again, wherever your ship happens to be, you can just push it off and put it back in the bag. Or you can spend more points and actually remove the die. When you remove the die, it actually comes off the board over here. Now, this removed oil section, just like the saved animals, they're going to be filling up over the course of the game. And you're going to see these orange cubes. Every time you fill up a column of removed oil or a row of rescued marine life, you're going to get one of these orange cubes. These are activation cubes that are going to be used to power those resource cards down at the bottom. Now, we haven't talked about these yet because they're just a little kind of special ability you can use on your turn. You have to power them up with a cube, and then you can use them once.
Yeah, these are actually pretty cool powers. And at the beginning of the game, every player at the table is going to get 2 of them, select 1 of them, and that's how you're going to end up with these 4. Now, once you have a cube on here, that is a power that you can use and anyone can use on their turn. When you do, you're simply going to remove that cube, remove that card so that you can't keep using it, and replace it with a new one. Now, like I said, all of these powers do very specific and usually powerful things. For example, this one is Dredge, and this one lets you remove an oil die in your sector from the board. So it's not going to take you an action point. And removing an action die, or a die, usually takes 3 action points.
It's a lot.
So this is a fairly powerful card. So you want to use that when you can, maybe in a pinch, to really try to get things a little bit more progress taken before the next player's turn. But these resource cards can come into play significantly.
Yeah, and you're going to see that some of those cards have space for 2 cubes, and some of them have decisions where you can do a 1 cube power or a 2 cube power, because like everything in this game, it's all about timing these moves. You want to use those cards at the most efficient time, just like you want to add those extra dice at the most efficient time, because you think you might be doing really well in the beginning of the game. You're going to start off doing well, but spillouts are going to happen. Sectors are going to get filled with oil, animals are going to get contaminated, and every time you have a spillout, the difficulty is going to increase a little bit. That arrow is going to move to the next number, and it's going to increase the number of dice. So you can't just let a spillout happen. If you
Right.
do, you're going to be dealing with 4, 5, or 6 dice coming out every single turn. It gets overwhelming fast.
Yeah, and when those spillouts do happen, and again, a spillout is when there's 3 dice in one sector, you're going to want to take care of that, because once it's a spillout, you might think, okay, well, that one's a lost cause. This is not the case. If there are 3 dice there and another die were to hit that sector, it's called an overflow, and that die is just going to go to the next sector clockwise. So you want to get rid of those things. In fact, most spillouts, you might even want to take 2 dice off of there,
Right.
because if you just take 1 and then another die comes out, it's effectively triggered another spillout, and this is going to ratchet up again.
Yeah, it's a lot to manage. Luckily, you do have these variable player powers like we talked about a little bit. And between the variable player powers that break some of the game's rules and those cards, you can do some really cool turns that let you suddenly clean up areas of the board you didn't think you'd be able to.
Yeah, and these powers really make you feel as a player like you've got something special going on. This one, for instance, the Hazmat Specialist, removing oil dice, which normally cost 3, only cost 2, and that's in an ongoing fashion for them.
Yeah, which is huge. I mean, you really have to be removing those oil dice a lot.
Well, yeah, and especially if there's 4 actions, when it costs you 3, you're removing
Right.
1.
And
if it costs you 2, you might get 2 off the board in one turn.
The marine biologist here can rescue animals adjacent to them as well. So you don't have to spend as much time moving. You can just grab every animal that's around you, which at the start of the game can be really good. You could rescue 4 animals right at the start just to get kind of a boost on that.
Yeah, that can be significant. And some of the specialists' powers are once per turn. These 2 are more of an ongoing thing, but some of them let them save an animal for free that round in their space. So you can kind of manipulate those powers along with the action points that you have, not to mention the extra action pool if you want to push it, to really get some things done. And like this part right here is kind of an interesting aspect, because it is that push your luck where you're like, okay, I'm going to do all these things. And the guy sitting to your left is like, well, great, because now I have to roll extra die on my turn.
And they can be bad. So yeah, all of these things are happening. This game is going to escalate in difficulty like any good co-op. So if you're a fan of games like Castle Panic or like Pandemic, this is going to scratch some of those same itches when it comes to that cooperative crisis management style game.
So yeah, that is The Spill from Smirk and Dagger. You're going to want to check out their campaign for more information. And in fact, you should note that this is a prototype. In particular, the tower is undergoing a significant, this is just a 3D printed thing.
Right.
It's going to be a much sturdier thing. Although, I have to say, this is a very attractive and colorful game sitting on our table, even in prototype form.
Sure.
But yeah, if you have any questions at all, please feel free to make them in the comments below. We'll try to answer them if we can. And until next time, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you then. Congratulations, you got to the end of one of our videos. Now, if you want more practice, just click on the video over here. It's another video. You might not have seen it yet, so click on it. If you don't want to do that, at least click on the subscription button below. That always helps us. And if you want notifications, please ring that bell.